Previously, I mentioned the phenomenon of being a YouTube personality and getting bombarded with several poorly translated emails per month from Chinese companies offering me free samples of junk for review. A couple of videos back, I mentioned that one of these emails, actually 5 of them in a row, offered me a laser engraver. So I was intrigued, replied to the email, and received the Tour Laser Master Blaster, whatever it was called, and it was a surprisingly fun little thing and an overall positive experience. It was such a positive experience that I decided to do it again. So I picked another email to reply to, replied to it, waited a few weeks, and this arrived. It's huge. And then a week later, this arrived from the same company, unsolicited, and then I picked another email to reply to, and then waited a few weeks, and this arrived. And then this, and then this. For some reason they sent me the same attachment twice, but that's alright. This is the Niji Master 2S Max. This is also called the Niji Master 2S, but it's not called Max. Maybe it's called Caleb, or Penelope. And this is the X-Tool D1. Counting the 2 from the previous video that I've since given to my mom, I now have experience with 4 different diode laser engravers. So I have some important questions to answer. Which one's the best? Which one's the worst? And are any of these worth your money at all? No. I mean, let's find out. Work surface area. The little Niji, which is not the Mini, by the way, they make one smaller than this, they do call the Mini, has a work surface area of 170 by 170 millimeters. The X-Tool has a work surface area of 432 by 406 millimeters, rather odd size, and the Max has a work surface area of 810 millimeters, almost a meter, by 460 millimeters, easily double the size of the X-Tool. And the Tour had a work surface area of 400 by 400 millimeters, so just marginally smaller than the X-Tool over there. Construction. The Tour, both the Nijis and almost every other laser engraver on the market, is built from aluminum extrusions. They have plastic V-rollers that ride on those aluminum extrusions, and they have some other material that tie the extrusions together. In the case of Tour, that other material is, I believe, aluminum, possibly painted steel, and in the case of the Nijis, it's rather fittingly laser-cut acrylic. The X-Tool, on the other hand, is different. These rails are still aluminum extrusions, but they're C-channels and they're super thick. And it doesn't have plastic V-rollers riding on aluminum extrusions, it has steel rollers riding on steel rails. Does this beefed up construction add any practical upshots? No, and quite frankly this thing seems hilariously overbuilt for a hobby-grade diode laser engraver, but it looks nice and that might make you feel better about buying it. Connections. All 4 of these laser engravers can work over a hardwired USB connection. In addition, both of the Nijis have Bluetooth. Although it's best not to think of them as having Bluetooth since I couldn't get absolutely anything to connect to them. While I'm at it, the USB connection was also pretty finicky and unreliable. There were a ton of drivers to install, none of which worked the first time, and I have to keep restarting Lightburn to make sure that these things stay connected. It's annoying. The D1 here also has Wi-Fi, and much unlike the Bluetooth on the Nijis, it's actually really good. The Wi-Fi connects within seconds of turning the machine on, and it's been so flawless and reliable that after the initial setup, I haven't plugged this thing into USB again. It's been really good. Let's talk about English. I know. Bear with me. I promise this won't go anywhere. All of these lasers are from Chinese companies, which means from time to time some bad translations pop up. That's totally fine. Translations are hard and English is a silly language, but Niji put no effort at all into proofreading their translations with some pretty hilarious results. First and foremost, there's the warning labels on the front of both of these laser engravers that say, "Mind the fire," "Wear goggles," that one's actually pretty reasonable, "No touching," and "Mirror object." That one's open to interpretation. Here's an excerpt from the manual. After a period of time, the belt may be aging and relaxation, resulting in image printing offset. You can use screwdriver and inner hexagonal wrench to adjust the screws at the 2 positions of the machine, so as to retighten the belt. I mean, I get what it's trying to say, but that's not how we say those things. Then there's my favorite typo of all time. It's on Niji's website. For each one of these diode lasers, they have a chart that has a list of different materials and the speed and power setting of the laser you need to cut all the way through it. Well, in this list of materials, they have something called 3mm bitch ply. Never heard of a bitch tree before. Wonder if that's part of the dogwood family. To be clear, I'm not making fun of these translations because, ha-ha, they don't speak English good. That'd be silly. I don't speak Mandarin or Cantonese. I'm making fun of these translations because they could have at least proofread them a little bit, but no, instead we get charts telling us that we can do marking and craving on acrylic. Software. I had to re-record most of this video because right in the middle of filming, Xtool dropped a big old bombshell on me. We'll get to that in a second. With laser engravers, you can use whatever software you'd like. There's a few of them out there, but the most common one, and the one I use, is called Lightburn. It's full-featured, easy to use, blah, blah, blah. But with the Xtool D1 here, you can't use Lightburn, or whatever you want to use. You can only use Xtool's own software, LaserBox Basic. It's essentially a stripped-down version of the software that they ship with their big CO2 laser, the Make Block LaserBox. That was until last week when I got an email from Xtool that said, we shipped out a new firmware update and now you can use this with Lightburn. Yeah, you can use this machine with Lightburn now. Previously, I went on ad nauseum about all of the flaws and oddities about the LaserBox Basic software, but now that it's not the only software you can use, none of it matters. I'll be honest though, getting this thing to work with Lightburn was a huge pain in the butt. Essentially all you're doing is updating the firmware, which you do through LaserBox Basic, then you download the device prefs package and then import that into Lightburn and Bob's your auntie, everything's golden. But that didn't work quite right for me. LaserBox Basic didn't update the firmware. It just sat there on the updating screen for literally hours, so I had to go through the alternative way of doing this, which was well documented on their website to be fair, but on a Mac anyway, and involved terminal commands and running Python scripts. And none of these terminal commands were straight copy and paste. I had to modify all of them. So I imagine to the normal person that doesn't have terminal experience, this whole process would have been completely impossible. I managed to get it done, but I have terminal experience. Hopefully, if you have to go through this process and you don't have terminal experience, the firmware updater in your version of LaserBox Basic just works. Hopefully. The Xtool D1 operates a bit differently from other laser engravers. Most laser engravers, like the little Neji here, use absolute positioning. When you start up the machine, it does its little homing move so it can find its 0-0 position. In Lightburn, the canvas you have to draw on is a grid that represents the work surface area of the machine. So if I draw a circle on this grid at position 100-100, this machine is going to engrave a circle at position 100-100. The Xtool D1, on the other hand, uses relative positioning. In LaserBox Basic, you still have a canvas that represents the work surface area of the machine, but it doesn't matter where on this canvas you draw whatever it is you're going to draw. When you hit the Go button, it's going to crop down around to only what you've drawn. Then in this screen, you're given a dot that represents the start point of your engraving that you can place wherever you want. This dot represents the crosshair laser beam that's in the laser module head of the D1. So if I want to engrave a circle right in the middle of this spray paint can, for whatever reason, I can go into LaserBox Basic, draw a 10mm wide circle, move my start point to the middle of this circle, then I can move the crosshair laser beam so that it's right in the middle of that paint can lid, hit the Go button on the machine, and now I have a circle pretty close to in the middle of this paint can lid. It's worth mentioning that Lightburn also has a start from current position option, so you can use all these other laser engravers with relative positioning just like you can with the Xtool. And it works fine, but for some reason the first time I tried this option, this is what happened. Okay, that's enough. That's enough. I don't know what all that was about. I told it to engrave a circle. And now that the Xtool supports Lightburn, you can use this with absolute positioning. But it's terrible at it. The limit of travel on the y-axis is soft. It's bouncy, because this is where the cable goes. There's no hard stop. As such, the repeatability is terrible. I tested this out. I engraved a circle at position 200-200, honed the machine, and then engraved the exact same circle again, and it didn't hit the same target twice. Now, does this whole relative versus absolute thing make a big difference? Not really, but it's something you should know about the Xtool before you consider purchasing one. Personally, I think the whole crosshair laser thing combined with Xtool's very intuitive software make this the easiest to use laser, and this is the one that I keep going back to for all of my silly engravings. Focus! All of these machines have slightly different methods of setting the focus on the laser module. The Ortur comes with a little bar that represents its focal length. You set the bar under the laser module, unscrew the thumb screw, drop the module down onto the bar, and your focus is set. The process with the Nej Max here is almost the same, but they don't ship any sort of focal length spacer with the machine. And they don't tell you what the focal length is. I had to look it up. I found out it's 22 millimeters. So I made my own little spacer here to drop underneath the laser module head. And now the process is close to what the Ortur is, except I have to use a hex key instead of a thumb screw, so it's not a tool-free operation. So basically it's the same as the Ortur, just less convenient. The process is the same on the X tool here, except slightly more convenient. Instead of having a bar you can lose, it has this arm that drops down the side of the module. Drop that down, loosen the thumb screw, and now your focus height is set. The focus procedure with the Niji Penelope, on the other hand, is completely different. This is not a fixed focus laser module, it's adjustable focus. So instead of physically moving the module up and down, you tighten and loosen the lens cap on the bottom to adjust the focus of the laser. So you just fiddle with it until the laser spot on your material is as small as possible. Caleb, or Clyde, or Penelope, has a 5.5 watt laser, the same as the Ortur. The D1 has 2 diode lasers in here that join beams to create 10 watts of output, which is pretty impressive for a diode laser, but not quite as impressive as the Max. This unit also has 2 diode lasers that join together, but its power output is 15 watts, the most I've ever seen out of a diode laser, which is pretty impressive. It's just too bad they choose to lie about it all over Niji's website and in several embedded videos on their website. This is called a 40 watt laser, which is not true. I already said this is a 15 watt laser. That is the output power of this thing. So why are they calling it a 40 watt laser? Because that's the input power of the laser module. The output power, the number that actually matters, is 15 watts, but it draws 40 watts of power. So that's what they're calling it, and that is incredibly deceptive and misleading. Okay, so it's not a 40 watt laser, but at 15 watts, it's still the most powerful diode laser here and the most powerful one that I've ever seen. So how does this 15 watt Niji compare to the 10 watt X-Tool D1? Worse. Much worse, in fact. It did so poorly on the first cut test that I thought, I've got to have something wrong here. So I fiddled with the focus a little bit more, dispensed with the focus bar and adjusted it by eye, and the results improved marginally, but it still did much worse than the results I got from the X-Tool D1. Here's the cut test that I drew up in Lightburn. It's a grid with the speed on the x-axis and number of passes on the y-axis. And even at a glance, you can see how much better the X-Tool did than the Max here. The X-Tool was able to cut all the way through this 3mm thick or 1/8 inch thick piece of plywood in one pass at 240 millimeters per minute. Meanwhile, the Max could only do it at 120 millimeters per minute. And across the board, you can see the X-Tool was able to cut all the way through this material at much higher speeds. And just for funsies, I ran the same test on the 5.5 watt little Niji, and this is how well it did. Not exactly useful for cutting, it's more of an engraving tool, but it can still do the job in a pinch, I suppose. And for more funsies, I also ran these tests on 1/4 inch thick plywood, and the Max was not able to cut through this at all. The X-Tool did an okay job, still not the right tool for cutting through 1/4 inch thick plywood, but it can do it. The Max could not. Like I said, I already gave the Ortur to my mom, so I couldn't run these cut tests on it too, but it's also a 5.5 watt laser like the little Niji, so it's more for engraving duty. While you can cut through thin plywoods like this with a 5.5 watt laser, you're not going to want to buy it for that sort of purpose. Just like in the last video with the Ortur, I threw a bunch of samples at these laser engravers just to play with them. I tried cutting wadded up fabric and caught it on fire. I turned this coaster into a roller coaster. I turned leather into a disgusting smell. And with the higher powered lasers, the X-Tool and the Max, I turned 1/8 inch plywood into these little finger jointed boxes. In addition to the samples I tried, X-Tool sent me a box of samples to try. It included stuff like raw cardboard, interestingly, cardstock, some more thin plywood, a very skillfully chosen sheet of acrylic. They also sent me some other stuff like this lovely blue tumbler, an assortment of coasters, one of which is made of slate or shale, some sort of rock material, a blank photo frame that I proceeded to ruin, and a rock. Not like the country, like a rock. Most of it was pretty boring, but I was really interested to see what happened when I tried to laser engrave the slate coaster, or whatever rock it was. I didn't know what to engrave on it, so I just engraved a bullseye that's off-center. What's interesting is I don't know what the laser did to it, if it caused microfractures on the surface or if it caused the surface to melt and bead up slightly, but the texture that it engraved is raised. It did the same thing to this rock here. It caused a raised texture when I engraved it. And yes, this is a very creepy looking smiley face. I'm terrible at drawing. In addition, Xtool also sent me an attachment, a rotary roller for engraving cylindrical objects. Then through some sort of mix-up, they sent me a second one. I played with the rollers a bit. I engraved the focus bar that I had to make for the Niji, an aluminum beverage can, the thermos they sent me, which I screwed up because I put the roller in backwards, so it printed the image not only upside down, but mirrored, and a stainless steel Yeti, which I also screwed up, but for different reasons. These rollers are incredibly easy to use. First of all, to change the width of the rollers, all you have to do is unscrew one end of it, and then the other end slides back and forth between 3 different indentations, and it stays cogged with the timing belt the whole time. It would be difficult to make this easier to use. This is in stark contrast to the rotary roller attachment that Niji and Ortur sell, which are built like erector sets. They're completely componentized. This thing ships as is, and to change the width of those rollers, you basically have to rebuild the entire attachment. Then to actually use the rollers, it's just as easy. You plug it into the port provided on the board. Then in Layzerbox Basic, there is a toggle that says cylindrical working, and that's it. That's all you have to do to use these rollers. It could not be easier. In addition, because these rollers take up so much vertical space, Xtool sells these little screw-on foot extensions that act as riser blocks to lift the laser up higher off the ground. Why do no other lasers come with a riser block like this? It's such a simple idea. Annoyances. Caleb, this has Bluetooth, but I couldn't get anything to connect to it. Is that the only complaint? That can't be right. Max, I couldn't get anything to connect to the Bluetooth on this either. To save money, they mounted the control board on the end of the gantry here, which means the USB and power supply connect to a moving target, which can be really annoying at times. The only thing that keeps this cable from being in the way is its stiffness and uprightness, and I imagine over time this cable will lose its stiffness and uprightness, be in the way, and they don't make laser engraver Viagra. This is true for both Nijis, but their website is all kinds of wrong. As an example, on their website it says this laser can cut through 3mm thick plywood in one pass at 420 millimeters per minute. Well, I tested that, and no, it couldn't come anywhere near that number. Another metric on their website is it says the max move speed is 1,000 millimeters per second. 1 meter per second. That's 2.2 miles per hour. No, it cannot move that fast whatsoever. In fact, I tested it to see what the actual max move speed is, and the fastest I could get it to move is 4,000 millimeters per minute. So I don't know where this number came from. In fact, their website is so wrong, I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is actually not a 15-watt laser. But as I haven't the foggiest idea how to measure laser output, I'm just going to have to take their word for it. I noticed when engraving this work surface grid here that there's lots of alignment issues. Every other row is not in line with the row before it. And in several places where it was meant to engrave the same line twice, it didn't hit the same mark in the X direction twice, so it engraved 2 lines next to each other. In some cases, it's offset by almost a millimeter, which when you're talking about a CNC machine is way too little precision. I also noticed when doing these cut tests here that the top line of each one of these squares seemed to be shifted to the left by, again, almost a millimeter. You can see it overcut on this corner and undercut on this corner. But wait, there's more! The Niji Max is too big for its own good. Let me show you what I'm talking about by engraving a perfectly straight horizontal line. And now I shall do this, home the machine, and draw the same line again. And there's the issue. Not only is this second line shifted downward, it's also significantly skewed from the first line that I engraved. Y-axis movement on the Max is controlled by 2 completely independent stepper motors on either side of the gantry. So if the gantry gets bumped out of square, which as you can see is rather easy to do, it has no way to re-square itself thanks to the singular limit switch over here. So if it does its homing move, it'll move the gantry back until this limit switch is bumped, but because there's no limit switch over here, the gantry stays out of square. Xtool, regardless of what the laser is doing, if this machine's on, this fan is on, it's kind of loud and that's kind of annoying. There is no way to route this cable that feels right or puts it out of the way. In fact, this cable is the entire reason there's no hard stop on the back of this machine, because it plugs into the back of this stepper motor here and then fouls against this back rail, keeping it bouncy. And this last one is kind of a big one. This Xtool has no limit switches. 0. It has no idea where its boundaries are. So if I draw something in Layzerbox Basic that is the size of the work surface area, but I start the laser head in the middle, what do you think it does? What's even more curious is in LaserBox Basic, there's a home button. So what happens when you hit the home button if there's no limit switches? Well, it just moves to one corner until it can't anymore. Not quite as violently as if you tell it to engrave to somewhere off of the machine, but it's still crashing into itself, and that's unpleasant. I also have some annoyances with the LaserBox Basic software that ships with this machine. They're not that big of a deal now that you can use Lightburn, but I'll still go over them. The only unit it supports is metric, and the only speed unit it supports is millimeters per second. There are no other options. In the material drop-down list, instead of saying basswood, it says basswood. Well, I guess they updated the software. It did say bassword. Now that it's right, it's not funny anymore. The cut paths the software generates are meandering and decidedly unoptimized. As an example, when I engraved that grid between each row, it moved the laser head back and forth without the laser on. I guess it was just taking a break. I haven't seen this again, but when I engraved this grid here, it engraved these horizontal lines that weren't in the drawing. And there's the same complaint with all of these machines. They're wide open laser engravers, so the vaporized version of whatever you're cutting or engraving is going to fill the room you're in. Earlier, I tried to slice a piece of bread with a laser, and that smoke was delightful. Most smoke won't be like that. And to shield your eyes from the hazardous laser light that's coming off of these, they all come with these glasses of dubious efficacy, but unquestionable style. Now for the important bit, price. How much does each one of these machines cost, and are they worth it? The Ortur Laser Master Blaster 2 Pro 2 Furious is currently listed on Ortur's website for $480. This is for a 5.5 watt laser. The Niji Master 2S with its 5.5 watt laser is currently listed on Niji's website for $190. The big Niji, the Niji Master 2S Max with its 15 watt laser, maybe, is currently listed on Niji's website for $580. The X-Tool D1 with its 10 watt laser is currently listed on X-Tool's website for $650. Although you can buy this thing in a bundle with the rotary roller and the riser blocks, and that will set you back $793. The Ortur doesn't look like such a good choice anymore once you find out that the X-Tool D1 here is also available in 5 watt form for $10 less than the Ortur. And for $10 less, you get better build quality, higher ease of use, and more features. At the very least, this looks better. The little Niji is so cheap, it's practically an impulse buy, and there's nothing majorly wrong with it, so it'll work just fine. The Nej Max is underbaked and quite massively overpriced. You probably shouldn't buy it. It's worth noting, though, I'm not condemning Niji as a whole, just the Max. Niji makes a whole wide range of diode laser engravers that you can check out on their website, and I imagine most of them are just fine. Then there's the X-Tool D1. It is the most expensive, but it's also, by quite a wide margin, the best. It's not perfect, but it's the only one of these diode laser engravers I've seen that seems like it's had, I don't know, actual thought put into its development. What a novel concept. Since I've declared the X-Tool D1 the winner of this not a competition, what do you say we give it a victory lap? This is going to take a while. Well, I took the laser engraver inside last night in the dark so it wouldn't get rained on, and... oh, well, I guess this is a Dodge Duragno now. Suppose I could tell people it's French. Duragno. No one's going to believe that. Well, it did a good job anyway. Some rust spots. Oh, look, it engraved some bird poop there. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.